We'll take a quick walkthrough today of what's new in Ephemeris Web 2.6. The main change you'll probably see straight away is that the colors in the timeline here have changed. Mostly before they were sort of this fawn type color. What I've done here is update them to match better to what you will find in the iOS app. And particularly if you in night mode, you'll be more familiar with these blues for the twilight hours, silvery greys for moon-related events, etc. And here we've got sort of a combination of the day mode and night mode that you see in TP for iOS, just combined into one in the web app. So the main thing here is the color changes. Other than that, nothing else has particularly changed on the timeline, other than what I'm going to show you next. We've got the pin set here in Hawaii. This is on the west coast of the Big Island, and you're probably aware that a total lunar eclipse, the first one in a while, is due to occur around the 26th of May, later on this month. And so to prepare for that, we've added lunar eclipse support into Ephemeris that's available for Pro subscribers. So the Eclipse Events, there are several of them when it comes to a lunar eclipse, which is what we've added here. You can skip to the next event, and that includes lunar eclipses. So you'll see here that I clicked next event. We're on May 25th. The time is skipped to 10 to 11 in the evening. And if I scroll along the timeline, you'll see that that's when this lunar eclipse event kicks off with the start of the penumbral eclipse. That phase is scientifically known as P1, and that denotes the start of the penumbral eclipse, which is when the moon moves into the half shadow of the Earth. It's not entirely in the central shadow, the umbral cone, if you will. And so this usually shows up as a slight darkening of the moon. You'd be hard pressed to spot it typically. But just under an hour later, we start with the partial eclipse. That's called phase U1. That might be clipped off, but it says start of partial eclipse. Then if we go to the next day, May 26th, you'll see, this looks a little bit more dramatic. And indeed, at 1:10 in the morning, with the moon relatively high in the sky, 47 degrees above the horizon, to the southwest, that's when the total eclipse of the moon begins. And that's when the moon turns that red-orange, deep red-orange color, blood supermoon, is what you'll probably read in the press. And it's called that because A, it's a total lunar eclipse, and B, it's happening at a time when the moon is near to its closest approach to the Earth. That's called perigee. Perigee happens every month. The moon's distance from the Earth cycles in and out from between perigee, closest, and apogee, most distant. And the variation in size from smallest to largest is about plus 14%. So when it's closer, it looks about 14% larger in the sky. This eclipse event is happening right at full moon, by definition. You can only get a lunar eclipse at full moon because the moon is the other side of the Earth from the sun, and so it's possible on occasions for the moon to move into the Earth's shadow, and that's what you're seeing during this eclipse. And it's happening with the moon pretty much at its closest approach to the Earth for this cycle. So this is what the press loves to call a blood supermoon, and the human eye loves red, so we have some nice dramatic red colors to call it out here on the timeline. The time of greatest eclipse is when the moon is deepest in the shadow of the Earth, so that's when the colors will typically be at their most intense. It does vary from eclipse to eclipse and depending on where you're located, but this time is probably the deepest, darkest red that you're likely to see. You'll notice that this is a pretty short event. It's around 12, 13, 14 minutes in total. These times are accurate to around a minute or so. The the error in this algorithm that gives you the greatest time is, at its worst, it's around a minute off from the most accurate time that could be calculated. Typically it's much better than that, but that's why we're quoting these sort of to the nearest minute. If we go to the sphere page, what I'm going to do, I'm going to click back to transit here, and we'll go to the sphere. There you go. You see there's Big Island Hawaii. There's the moon high in the sky, roughly to the mostly to the south at this point. If I click to the next event, everything turns red. So you might think, well, that looks a bit gimmicky, but it's a short event in this particular case. It's also rather important, and from a photographic perspective, things get much, much, much darker at this point. And so it's often tricky when you're photographing a lunar eclipse to get your lens to focus automatically. It can be a challenge. So you probably want to have your focus set before you get into total eclipse if you're shooting this. So this is done so you really can't miss it, because if you're scrolling the timeline, you see it's pretty short. So a dramatic red color to indicate the period of totality for the eclipse. That's why it's there. You won't miss it. This is a planning tool, so you sort of want to know when that's happening. Let's skip to, let's have a look. We'll skip out of the eclipse. We'll go forward to, there's a new moon. What you might notice here on the timeline is, if you're a pro subscriber, there's a new hours of darkness indicator that is added onto the altitude chart here. I'm going to go back to the map just to illustrate how this really works. Essentially what it's showing you are the hours between or at the end of astronomical twilight. So that is when the sun is 18 degrees below the horizon. After that time are the hours of true darkness, if you ignore the moon. When I click astronomical end here in the timeline, you'll see that corresponds here to the start of the hours of darkness. And so this is just a quick visual indication that if you're doing night photography, astrophotography, those are the hours of true darkness. Let's just show you that when the sun is starting to rise again and reaches minus 18 degrees, that is the end of the hours of true darkness. So that's a convenience, really, just an additional visual indication of the hours of darkness. Last thing, up here we used to have a link to the About page. That's available on the website, so it's sort of duplicative of if you went to the website by clicking here, you can still get to the About page there. So instead what I have here is a link to the Updates page, which is the release notes for the web app, where you will find additional detail of everything that's changed. It includes more details than I've probably discussed here, on smaller changes, bug fixes, that sort of thing. So if you want to know what's new, you can just click through on updates. Otherwise, that is it for the 2.6 release. I hope you're all, those of you who will be able to see it, which is primarily the Western Americas, the Pacific and Australia, New Zealand, Oceania, Eastern Asia, they will get to see this total lunar eclipse on the 26th of May. Others will have to wait until, I think, in November of this year is the next event. And certainly in May of 2022, roughly, I think almost a year to the day from now, there is a really long lunar eclipse, I think, which will be an even better opportunity. If you haven't photographed one of these before, they are spectacular. So well worth planning for. That's it. Thanks for listening, and we'll have some more updates before long. Thank you.